Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is just after 2100 on a Friday night, and that means it's time for the Brushfire Mind. Good evening. This is Christopher Lowry. I'll be your host. I've got an American John here and my good buddy Cameron. And tonight we're going to be talking about a couple of hot issues. We're going to hit Hillary's speech from yesterday. I've got an American John here and my good buddy Cameron. And you have my deep apologies. Tonight we're going to be talking about a couple of hot issues here. Woo. Sorry about that, kids. I had the YouTube channel up so I could post the link, but whoops, it happens. So technical difficulty solved. All right, where was I? We're going to talk about Hillary's speech yesterday, where she said, "Hey, we're going to have a foreign policy discussion." And she got up and spent about 55 minutes. Show you these. That's the transcript. Yeah. Spent about 55 minutes just berating Trump. And I've been through the transcript of it, and I would say that around 80% of her statements are provably false, and the other 20% are just pure slanderous ad hominem. Amusingly, coming from the anti-First Amendment left, this is the sort of language that is actually not protected by the First Amendment. It's one thing to say that somebody's an asshole, but to make factually incorrect and damaging statements about someone is a crime. And I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to stop talking about it right there for just a second. I'm going to ask the lawyer to speak a little bit about what slander and libel is.
All right. Slander is a spoken statement in public, specifically attacking a person's character, moral character, that you have a loathsome disease, that was the legal term, that you are a liar, a cheater, something along those lines. Libel is the written version of that. Internet speech has been held to be libel. Libel is held to a higher standard because it is permanent. However, what you're talking about is political speech. There are different allowances made for political speech. And if you read campaign speeches from the 19th century, many of them were pretty, what we would term outrageous also. They called, just some of the insults and names that people called each other back then, going back to John Quincy Adams or going back to Lincoln and versus Douglas.
John Quincy Adams was accused of being a devil-worshipping hermaphrodite who sought to enslave all of your daughters into whore homes.
Because he was a Mason.
Yeah.
Okay. At that time, the Masons were the big conspiracy theory of the day. Depends on who you ask, whether it was rightful or not. But the undertext of the loss of the first. There used to be two parties in America. I think there were the Democrats and the Federalists. The Federalists disintegrated with the anti-Masonic movement of the 1830s and 40s. Then along came various groups which were analogous to the Tea Party groups. They were the Wide Awakes, the Know-Nothings, and they eventually turned into the Republican Party. So the Republican Party really was the result of protest parties against Masonry back then. As far as calling Quincy, John Quincy Adams this or that, or calling, they called Lincoln he was called the ape in newspapers, and there were newspaper cartoons that depicted Lincoln as an ape.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that if Hillary Clinton calls Trump Godzilla, it really doesn't matter. The idea is that, let the shots fall where they may. What does come into issue is her relating to her own record, and it's so damn poor. Still,
before we get into records, before we get into her absolute inadequacy as a human being, based on her record, I want to hit a couple
based on her record.
Yeah, I want to hit a couple of particulars from the speech itself. One that really struck me is where she spoke about the danger of a Trump presidency relative to foreign policy. And she said, this is a man who said that more countries should have nuclear weapons, including Saudi Arabia. She made that this is a direct quote, statement.
Yes.
Now, relative to the comments that he made in that regard, Trump actually said that basically as long as we have Pakistan already has a nuke, Egypt already has a nuke, Iran is going to get the nuke. The current Iran nuclear deal functionally guarantees them a nuke within 15 years.
So Obama and Hillary Clinton themselves maneuvered Saudi Arabia into the position where they require a nuclear weapon.
Yet they can't be the only major superpower in the region without the big swinging weapon.
So I went and looked up the interview, and Trump actually made the point. He was being asked about nuclear weapons, and he made the point, well, look at Asia. North Korea already has the nuke. They're developing missiles to be able to throw that nuke further and further out.
Yes.
But South Korea does not. Japan does not. Why should we prevent Japan and South Korea from having the nuke when we have not prevented North Korea from having the nuke? Essentially, what he said is that the argument of who gets to have nuclear weapons is exactly the same as the argument of who should be allowed to have any weapon. If you say nobody can have nukes, then only your terrorist actors, your bad actors. Basically, if you outlaw bananas, only outlaws will have bananas.
Gun-free zones.
Yeah. So essentially, what people like Hillary, I'm not advocating nuclear proliferation. Obviously, the nukes are terrible, but at the same time, the argument against nuclear proliferation is essentially, hey, if we tell all the good guys they're not allowed to have nukes, then the bad guys won't have them either.
That's right. That's a Democrat mentality. However, that was a maintainable position to prevent nuclear proliferation for many years while the technology was out of range for many of them, and while the United States military was ready, willing, and able to bear that burden, and the U.S. did so for 60 years. However, the U.S. is no longer able to bear that burden. The country is in bad financial shape. Our military is conventionally less capable than it's been in a long time. And, the bad guys, as you say, have the bomb. We cannot carry the load forever. Sooner or later, South Korea, Japan, Germany, and other countries, they have to gun up. If the policeman in your neighborhood is not going to come around when you call, or he will come late, well, what do you do in your own neighborhood? You get a gun. That's
maybe form a neighborhood watch.
Yeah.
Well,
that's basically what happened.
I've always loved the bumper sticker slogan, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. It's absolutely true.
That's right.
Furthermore, the Supreme Court in this country has held that the police do not have a duty to defend or to intercede. The duty of a police officer is only to investigate crime and apprehend criminals after the fact. They are not, a cop can watch you get beaten to death and then arrest the criminal for doing it, and he is perfectly right under the law, according to the Supreme Court in 3 separate decisions.
Okay.
And by the way, all 3 of those decisions are within the last 20 years.
I understand. So what you're looking at is a trend of stand back and watch. Now, we have just seen a situation where I guess the analogy would be that a riot went down in Libya and the cops stood by and watched while the local homeowner was put out of his house. Okay, so now we have a mass Islamic invasion into Europe coming right through Libya. Now, was this part of some grand global New World Order scheme to build a greater Israel or to cripple Europe while financiers made their big escape or whatever it was? If I was Saudi Arabia or I was Japan, I would see the writing on the wall. And I wouldn't care what the United States was saying. I would get a nuke. That is common sense. I know that Japan has the capacity to build a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks, and they have had that capacity for many decades. They also have a basically unregistered aircraft carrier, or 6, that have not been publicly announced, but they still have them. The same thing goes with the South Koreans. They probably have all kinds of goodies stored in the hills of South Korea. That's what I would do if I was them.
But I'm sorry, John, but I mean, in the problem with a Muslim threat, the fact that mutually assured destruction is not a deterrent to them. The Russians never wanted to launch their nukes because they feared the counterattack. The same reason.
Right.
I think you're making a mistake.
No. With Russia, with the Cold War, with the nuclear problem of Russia, mutually assured destruction was a truly effective implementation.
Yes.
When you talk about Islam, when you talk about Muslims and the tactics that they use and are comfortable with, they have stated quite clearly that the reason they will be victorious is because they, unlike we, worship death. We believe that life is sacred and holy and important, whereas the Muslim believes that life is temporary and therefore utterly inconsequential. Death, having permanence, is much more meaningful. That's why they are suicide bombers. That's why they use that tactic. They believe that they worship death in that way.
I think you're making a mistake here.
For that reason, mutually assured destruction is not a deterrent for these people.
I think that you are conflating elite Muslims with man-in-the-street Muslims. Man-in-the-street Muslims, or the ordinary Muslim, is a subnormal intelligence led by a medieval religion. They are controlled by this. It's their. It is what makes them tick.
Yes,
but I do not think that
is the enemy. That is the enemy that we're talking about.
Okay.
The elite Muslims, which may not share the same reverence for death that the direct enemy foot soldier has, they don't live in the same places, and for that reason, as well, the mutually assured destruction deterrent doesn't hold the water.
Saudi Arabia is led by a large family, a dynasty, must be 5 or 10,000 House of Saud princes and emirs and all sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They want to keep that power they've had for a long time. The same thing goes for the Iranian mullahs. They may run around in a bathroom and quote scripture, but at the end of the day, they want power. They don't want a desolate Iran. They may talk a good talk and stir up the masses and let them go hog wild every now and then, but I think at the end of the day, the mullahs and the the various imams and that sort of thing, they may be talking all that at the street level.
Right.
But the leadership.
But John, you're making my point.
Look,
hang on.
Those,
you're making my
same
point for
Saudi, those some Saudi princes, according to the, and I'm actually blanking on the report that was redacted by the government, but apparently 28 pages were left out because it implicated Saudi Arabia pretty directly in 9/11. And
yes.
Okay, and so mutually assured destruction. Okay, they don't want to. They don't want their castles and mansions and palatial estates to be blown up. They want to continue to live their lives of amazing wealth and luxury and power. Sure, they do, but they are not afraid to do terrible things to us. And maybe you're right. Maybe their personal greed and their personal motivations would overcome would overcome their hubris, but maybe not. Maybe they are Muslims at heart in the sense that they think of us as their enemy. They trick us. They use us. The only reason they pretend to be our friend is it advances their cause.
Of course. I don't expect them to be my friends. I'm not expecting them to look at me with any decency in their heart. That's what we have nuclear weapons for. That's what we have a military for, is to keep them in fear.
But just real quick, like I was starting to say, you're making my point. The elites that are not interested in being blown up, that may not be as dedicated to sacrificing themselves as the foot soldier is, they're in Iran, where we're doing negotiations and talks, not fighting a ground war. They're in Saudi Arabia, where nobody's talking about dropping a bomb on Saudi Arabia, about even sending drones for surgical strikes. Where the mess is, where the enemy is, that's the active enemy that's fighting, and where our focus in the war is not there. It's in Libya, it's in Syria, it's in Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. So they're unlike the people in the United States, who, yes, we occupy a much larger landmass, but that is the country. The elites that you're talking about that might actually have an interest in staying alive and be thereby swayed by the implementation of a mutually assured destruction situation, they are physically and geographically separated from the actual hard targets that would take the brunt of such an attack. So they're a non-factor. They're a non-factor in that situation.
Iran might not attack directly, but they could equip a dozen Hezbollah guys with a suitcase bomb and say, we didn't do it. And yet they really did, just like 9/11.
Right. Again, because they can distance themselves from the action, then the argument of a mutually assured destruction as an active deterrent is invalid.
Whether it is a deterrent or not, and whether we're trying to apply 1950s and 1960s mutual assured destruction doctrine is irrelevant. You just said that Egypt had the bomb. I was not aware of that. Is that true?
Say again?
You said that Egypt have a nuclear bomb capacity. Is that correct?
Yeah. Let me double check. That was something that slipped a couple of years ago.
Because if that's the case, that explains a lot about the Arab Spring routine. The only way to attack Egypt without directly attacking it is from within, a uprising, an intifada.
For one, they signed the Non-Proliferation Act in '63, but delayed ratification.
According to the NTI, they do not appear to have nuclear weapons. Apparently, they have nuclear materials, but not nuclear weapons.
Who knows? I don't know. I know that South Africa had them. They mysteriously disappeared. North Korea's probably had them for 10 years. They passed it on to Pakistan. Pakistan's passed it on to whoever they passed it on to. My point is, the 2020s is the proliferation decade. If we get through the 20 teens without the world blowing up, we are going to see a dozen more nuclear powers in the 2020s. You cannot try to rely on a 1950s or 1960s mentality and say we are dealing with rational people, i.e. the Russians, the French, the British, and therefore we'll all have a gentleman's club that agree not to use them. Those days are gone.
So they don't officially have the bomb, but they flubbed the investigation by the IAEA, the Alphabet Soup investigating agency, back in '03, and had to take corrective actions to guarantee that their nuclear development was strictly peaceful.
Yeah, right.
So
after 13 years, they had a pretty good chance to get it.
Yeah.
13 years is a long time. You can spin a lot of centrifuges in that amount of time. How long did it take the United States to develop a bomb from scratch? From 1936. Well, 8 years.
Lie down. Lie down like a big boy. Thank you. Love you.
That technology is 70 years old now.
Yes. Now, okay. No, and that's enough of that, because that's not one of the topics. That by itself is not a topic that we really wanted to dig into tonight, and I want to try and stay on point.
All right. You're the moderator.
Damn, I just shuffled my notes.
Organization is the key of battlefield effectiveness.
Okay. So, Hillary, back to quoting her speech a little bit, and I am not going through this entire.
No.
I'm not going through this whole damn thing. I'm gonna hit one more piece on this, and we're gonna dig into some interesting stuff. Something a little more interesting. Specifically, stuff about the rules of politics that Cameron and I have been discussing lately. So, but this last page, she says, and I quote, "He praises dictators like Vladimir Putin and picks fights with our friends, including the British Prime Minister, the Mayor of London, who's an aggressively anti-American Muslim who has been making threats against the United States since he was elected.
I don't want to be his friend.
The German Chancellor, okay, this is our friend, Merkel. How many rapes?
1,000 a day, something like that.
I mean, seriously?
Merkel, the one who had basically gutted Europe.
It's one thing to say that Germany is an ally, and yeah, great. I love Germany. I love Germans. Whatever.
Germany has been.
But that doesn't mean that we can't criticize one. That doesn't mean that we can't criticize one bad leader. Shut the front door. Oh, fuck. The president of Mexico. Now, take yourself a minute and pop you online and go read up on Mexican political promises.
Yeah.
Many of the currently elected Mexican officials ran on platforms where one of their key political promises was that they would take steps to ensure that going to America specifically illegally crossing the border so that they could send money back, would remain as easy as possible from their side. That is a common official platform for Mexican politicians.
In other words, all of Hillary Clinton's imaginary allies are the worst things possible for America.
And, of course, she said that Donald criticized our very, very good friend, the Pope.
Yeah.
This Pope in particular has directly
He's a disaster.
criticized
The
America.
Latin American Socialist Pope, that one?
Marxist. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't want to be his friend, and America does not want to be his friend. That's like saying that
and
somehow
he's
Trump
made
is
no
an antagonist
bones.
of Fidel Castro. Who cares?
He has made no bones. The Pope has made no bones at all about how much he dislikes America. He's been very clear about that. Specifically, our economic practices. He's been very clear about his disdain for capitalism and what we think of as liberty. Okay, now let me pop forward a little bit. On top of it, he believes America is weak, false, an embarrassment. No, he said those things about the current federal government, and there is a huge damn difference.
Yes, there is.
He called our military a disaster.
Yes.
Yes,
true.
he did.
Yeah, that's why so many military guys want to vote for it.
Under the current administration and the auspices of Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State, our military has been gutted and caused to become the weakest it has been since World War II.
No,
that's
since
what he
World
said.
War I. Since before World War I.
Yes, but that's not what he said. That may be the true fact. That's not what he said.
Okay.
What he said was since World War II. He said we are, and I quote, let me back up. This is a direct quote from Hillary's speech. He said we are, and I quote, a third world country. Way out of context, because she says, he said we are. Current tense, this is the case. He did not. He talked about, in one of his rally speeches, he talked about the development of infrastructure. Most especially, he talked about the high-speed bullet trains, monorails in India, China, and he said these guys are taking off with the technology and the infrastructure development, and by comparison, we are beginning to look like a third world country. That's what he said, and that's not an unreasonable statement.
No, it's not.
Take a look at Tokyo, take a look at Beijing, take a look at some big ass city in India that I can't think of the name of any of them off the top of my head right now.
Mumbai.
There you go, Dubai. Wow.
Mumbai. Bombay, Mumbai.
Whatever. But any of those, and they're gorgeous. They're great big. Oh wait, they're full of fucking Trump buildings. Funny how that worked out. So I mean, these are the things that she's saying, and the reason it's pertinent, the reason it's worth mentioning, the reason it's worth talking about, bringing up. This is the opinion that is held by his opponents, who will never allow themselves to be exposed.
Looters.
Me, I'm supporting Trump. I've got the transcript right here, though. I sat down and watched Hillary's speech. I read the transcript. I ran the fact checks. Hillary's supporters will never allow themselves to be exposed. I won't even call it the truth, just to the other opinion. They will never allow themselves to be exposed to the counterpoint, to the argument, to the rebuttal.
See, Chris, you and I have been talking about this, and I guess I actually kind of disagree with that. I think that is really the beauty of Donald Trump, and the fact that he is willing to just go ahead and fire both barrels each and every time he pulls the trigger, because they are going to be forced to be exposed to it, because Donald Trump will steamroller in the debates. I really believe that there are going to be certain things that are going to be absolutely unavoidable, and even among her core supporters, there are going to be people who are crushed. I think a lot of people on the right are really frustrated because they wanted a big right-wing hero, and that's not what Donald Trump is. But he is what goes bump in the night for all those leftists, because he's going to come in and kick the shit out of them. He's not going to let them do their rules for radicals game. You know, you were making the point, and you can run away with it, but that Hillary Clinton thinks that Donald Trump is playing by some alternate rule book, just a different set of politics, and he's not actually following any rules at all. And because of that, I think a lot of this stuff that the Hillary Clinton supporters and Democrats in general refuse to be exposed to, they're about to get exposed as fuck to it.
Right. So, yeah. Well, the beauty of that, and the advantage to Trump on this is, just like you said, this is a point I was making when I was talking to Cameron yesterday, and we went back and forth on it a little bit. Hillary is operating under the assumption that Donald Trump is playing by a different set of rules. She has not accepted, has not figured out, does not yet understand that he doesn't operate by any set of rules.
He's just telling the truth.
He has several favorite tactics. He has methodologies. He has directions he will go. He has tactics he will employ, specific attack lines that he likes to use. But what he does not have is a functional equivalent to, like, a Geneva Convention that restricts his use of individual tactics. So even though he has these favorites, he's wide open to just reach out and grab a new one, to make up some new stuff, to sit down at the drawing board, and to wipe the sand table clean and rebuild it.
But Cameron laid a point. She and mainstream Democrats are working directly from a rule book, the rules for radicals. All of the Trump protesters, that's straight out of Saul Alinsky tactics.
Absolutely.
My point is,
and I'm getting there.
Yeah, they don't know how to deal with something that's not put down in a nice checklist format, because that's what they're accustomed to, and they think the Republicans must be using something similar. And in fact, up until Trump, they were.
They were, and it's why they were so easy to defeat.
Yeah. Because rules for radicals is designed for people without principles. But the Republican electorate, unlike their leadership, are all about principles. That's why they are Republicans.
And more importantly, not only is the rules for radicals designed to be used for people without principles, and who are not strictly adherent to a moral or ethical code, it is specifically designed for people of that ilk to be used against people who do adhere to a moral and ethical code.
Correct. Yes.
One of Saul Alinsky's first points is, because America is a moral society, the most effective way to attack them is to turn that morality on them.
Yes.
To abuse it.
They're too decent to fight back.
Right. To abuse that morality by taking, the way I call it is, they like to take easy targets like women and children and hold them as moral hostages.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the fun bit. Here's where it really goes advantage Trump. Because of the way the liberals have built their system of rules for these kinds of engagements, Hillary cannot stray from them. Trump has shown clearly that his supporters will tolerate, accept, and in fact uh, absolutely praise and enjoy and applaud any straying from the whole PC narrative.
Yeah.
Trump attacks the media. Trump attacks media bias. He attacks the PC narratives. He attacks all these things. He's more than happy to just shit the rule book completely out the window. Hillary cannot do that. Hillary is absolutely married to that media rule book. If she starts walking off of the PC cloud, she's done.
She's already done.
She is trapped.
Along with
She's
Hillary
trapped
Clinton.
in her own prison of absurd, politically correct rules. That, effectively, what has happened now, she and her party and her ilk are the actual architects of her downfall.
Along with Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush had his own little Republican rule book. He would pretend to be the compassionate conservative, say lots of mealy-mouthed garbage while doing the other thing. Talk about immigration is an act of love. He didn't care about that. He cares about cheap votes and cheap labor and driving down the prevailing wages in America. That's all he's about. Well, in his rule book, all you have to do is make a greedy policy and paint a happy face on it. That's been the Republican rule for 20 years. At any time the Democrats come along, they pretend to fight, but not really, because while we can just compromise and, you know, we'll go have martinis after this silly politics stuff is over. That's what they've been doing for 20 or 30 years.
No, and well, let's get back to the rules. Let's
Okay.
stay on the rules for just a minute. I got Rod slinging me notes on Facebook over here,
Rod, then by all means.
and he says any strength has to be converted to a weakness, like Trump's donation drives for the vets. Let's hit that for a minute.
Oh,
So
yeah.
back in January, Trump said, "You know what? I've had enough debates. I don't need to hear anything else out of you guys. I'm going to go spend my time raising money for the vets." Did a fundraiser. After the fundraiser's over, comes out and says, "Hey, we raised 6.2 or whatever $1 million for the vets."
Right.
And then some report comes out, "Oh no, he only raised $4.5 million."
Now they're saying he's stealing money from the vets. Really?
He only raised $4.5 million. Oh wait, no, here's the books. Oh, 6.2 was pledged, and some people backed out.
Yeah.
Let me put on my tinfoil hat for a minute. How much would it really cost you to promise Donald Trump at a donation rally that you were going to donate $2 million to the charity that he's running, and then not, so that you could write a story about him lying about the money he raised?
Wouldn't cost anything at all.
Hey, what do you know?
Great little setup.
Free scam.
And if you're a Saul Alinsky radical, that's exactly what you would do. And in fact, that's what on page 60 of Rules of Radicals.
And Rod just added, Wounded Warrior doesn't raise $4 million in a year. Hillary Clinton has donated, I think the figure they gave us was $750,000 to veterans charities, according to.
I wouldn't take a dime from that person.
Yeah, according to the records, it was either 75,000 or 750,000 over the course of her entire career.
Yeah.
Even if the numbers were completely even if the misreporting report was not misreported, and the total that he raised was only the 4.4 or 4.6,
Right.
$4.5 million.
And then he put another $1 million in.
That's
out of his own pocket.
Year. That's $4.5 to $5 million this year. And in fairness, it was raised in the first month of this year. So, I'm sorry, where's the problem?
Yeah.
talk about making a mountain out of a molehill.
So Rod is right. They're trying to turn a strength into a weakness. Oh, Trump stole money from his own pledges. No, he didn't get what was pledged because somebody might have made a false pledge, or they didn't pony up when they were supposed to. I hadn't even thought of your false pledge notion, but following the Saul Alinsky.
I mean, because seriously, who goes in and who pledges? You know, I mean, I could see a couple of people saying, "Oh yeah, put me down for $100," and then they forget to pay, or they just decide, "Oh, you know what?
$2 million is a
don't have that." But $2 million just disappears.
Yeah,
that's actual money. $2 million. That's fucking money.
Yeah. So I see your point, and it does strike you as a setup. It strikes me as a setup now that you mention it. But my mind is not wired that way. I am not a natural Alinskyite. It would not even occur to me. So, you know.
The only way it occurred to me is I read an article about it while I was researching the next topic we're going to discuss, which is media misrepresentation. I was specifically researching media misrepresentation and the history of misleading edits in light of the recent Katy Couric scandal.
I don't know that one.
Oh, you're going to love this.
Brief summary?
Do what?
A brief summary, please.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to love this one. So let's go ahead and jump onto that topic. We are at 9:45. I want to cut the show at 10 o'clock tonight because I got to get up and watch the babies in the morning. Got to get them rugrats running around, and they...
So your wife is going to go do drill?
Yeah, we don't talk about stuff like that so much on live
Yes,
broadcasts, sir. Timing, and yeah. I got my kids tomorrow. Happily married. I live with my wife. She's busy. Anyway. Okay, so Katy Couric made a movie, a little documentary about gun owners. Documentary gets released, and she asks the gun owners, the gun owner advocates, hey, how do you propose that we keep the weapons out of the hands of felons? And basically, it's crickets. They all just sit there with these kind of dumb looks on their faces, like they're confused and they don't know how to answer the question. You know, there's a lot of just... In fact, let me go ahead and pull up the... I'm going to pull up that video clip. We're gonna watch it together, a little 5-minute piece of it.
A little 5-minute piece.
Cameron, go ahead and talk. You're familiar with it, right?
Yes.
Go ahead and talk about it a little bit while I pull this video, and then we'll dig into it.
Well, the short version is, and of course these people had responses, and most of them had responses pretty quickly. And once the documentary came out, they all complained, like, hey, excuse me, we are not anywhere a quarter as stupid as you portrayed us as. I personally have seen this happen somewhere else recently. I love Rush Limbaugh. I love talk radio in general, but I love Rush Limbaugh. He's my favorite. I'm a total ditto head and not ashamed to say it. Don't always agree with Rush, but his analysis is usually pretty sharp, and the passion he brings I appreciate. And when that stupid fucking gorilla was shot, he made a joke about evolution, and he included Harambe in the joke. And what the joke was based on evolution, and it's an old riff on, you know, if man evolved from apes, why are there still apes? And that's not how evolution works. If the dinosaurs evolved into birds, well, I see all the birds, and I don't see any dinosaurs, and so forth and so on. But what was passed around on Facebook in Facebook's trending section was Rush Limbaugh is confused about how evolution works. And despite the fact that it was clearly a joke, he was being satirical. It was represented as though this guy does not understand how basic science works. And this has actually been done to him for his entire career. Years and years ago, he said once that it's never been proven how much nicotine actually causes the addiction. When his quote was reported, it was said that what he said was, it has never been proven that nicotine causes addiction. And leaving out those two little words, how much, took something that is a factually true statement and turned it into something that makes you sound like an absolute idiot. So these are tactics that the left has been pulling against us for a long time. It's part of the reason why the people that are attracted to Trump are attracted to him. He is immune to the media doing these sorts of things to him because he's willing to snap right back at him and be like, no, fuck you, you're a sleazeball. You're that ABC reporter? Yeah. You're a real piece of work.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got the clip here. Well, I've got a clip, and this is another Facebook guy talking about it. I'll be sure to include a link to his channel in our comments section below. So we're gonna watch this real quick.
Deceptive editing, selective editing. Let me just tell you, nothing compares to the deceptive editing that Katy Couric was just exposed doing in this documentary about pro-gun activists.
Okay.
Let me ask you another question. If there are no background checks for gun purchase,
It's not coming through real well, Chris. A flash here, a flash there, that's all.
Okay. Hold on a minute. Let me fix it.
Not happening.
And this is the raw version.
If there are no background checks for gun purchase,
Nothing compares to the deceptive editing that Katy Couric.
How's that, guys?
Let me take a look. I can't see it, Chris.
Was doing in this documentary about pro-gun activists. Check this out.
let me ask you another question. If there are no background checks for gun purchasers, how do you prevent felons, terrorists, from
Okay, you got it now?
Check this out.
Hang on.
Let me ask you another question. If there are no background checks for gun purchasers, how do you prevent
Yep.
Looks a lot better now.
purchasing a gun?
And this is the raw version.
If there are no background checks for gun
Yeah. Scene was deceptively edited instead of silence.
Hang on a minute, man. Let the clip play.
if you're a terrorist or a felon,
Okay, so clearly what we're seeing here, in the raw clip, each one of them clearly had immediate responses, and their responses were things like, "Well, if you've served your time, then you've served your time. You ought to have your rights back." Well, how do you keep away from terrorists? This is something I was talking to Kate about yesterday. You know, if the leftist asks you, well, If everybody can have a gun, how do you keep criminals and terrorists from having guns? Okay,
You
allow
don't
me
have
to
to
answer
worry
your
about
question
it.
with another question. If nobody's allowed to have a gun, how are you going to keep terrorists and criminals from having guns? That's if you outlaw bananas, only bananas will have outlaws. So as I was thinking about that a little bit earlier, grab my notes here. So she intentionally edited the video, not only to make it look like they didn't have an argument, but to make them look stupid, to make these people appear to be unintelligent.
Sure.
Now let's look at a little bit of this. We've got, selective editing. We've got Dan Rather got busted forging documents to make it look like Bush's service in the Air National Guard, to basically discredit Bush's service in the Air National Guard. And I mean, come on, it's the Air National Guard. How hard do you have to work to discredit the value of that service? I'm sorry. I'm an Army guy. I can't help myself. I have to correct. And Katy Couric also has a history of having done this before.
Brian Wilson.
Well, she back in the 90s.
Brian, who claimed he was fired on in a helicopter in Iraq.
No. He said he was shot down. and then after that, after he got busted that he wasn't shot down, he said, "Oh, I misremembered it. And somebody else got shot down. That's what happened. I misremembered."
I transposed my memory with somebody else. Subjective memory now. Why not?
Back in the late 90s, Katy Couric got busted falsifying data to produce an expose against the HPV virus. Now, John, you remember when we were at that one school, they talked about HPV all the time and how the girls needed to get checked for it before a certain age and needed to get that vaccine because of this, that, and the other thing. And that's no shit. That's some serious shit. HPV is no joke. Then you got Rachel Maddow. James O'Keefe was talking about having been targeted by people like this. Rachel Maddow got busted selectively editing some of his Acorn expose to debunk it, to discredit him. And then of course you've got was it CBS? It was MSNBC that edited the Trayvon Martin 911 call, and basically for
Trayvon
several
Martin,
weeks
12-year-old, he was actually 20 year, a gigantic thug who was on top of that. What was that fellow's name?
Zimmerman. And in fairness, Zimmerman is a shithead. Zimmerman has shown time and time again that he's
Trayvon Martin was not a innocent-looking little 12-year-old at the time of his crime.
Exactly. They ran a picture of him that was 8 years old. The picture was 8 years old, making him 12. Well dressed. Oh yeah, this monster, this evil, racist, white Hispanic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they tried desperately to make George Zimmerman into a white guy.
Yeah. Murdered. This poor little 12-year-old black boy in his Sunday best.
Pandemonium, where if you love something.
Yes, dear?
Sorry about that. I was actually trying to close a window, not open one. That was embarrassing.
And then, the same thing with the Micheal Brown case.
Yep.
Totally misrepresented. They show us this picture of him graduating high school. Like, oh, never mind the most recent images of the last images of him before his death.
I mean, about 15 minutes before his death, he fucking chokes out a store owner to steal cigars so he can roll blunts.
Oh, Rod, you're mistaken. We're not surprised that they're purposely being illogical. They're not, in fact, being illogical. Dishonest and illogical are not the same thing. They are logically and strategically and tactically very effective at using the acts and arts of deception and subterfuge and misdirection to craft a damaging narrative and use slander and libel to destroy otherwise credible thinkers. It's not illogical, but they're sophists. They're charlatans and sophists bent on destroying what is good and murdering things that live for the simple crime of choosing to live.
Well, the net result is illogic.
It is illogical for them to have the objectives that they have.
If you dig up all the logical fallacies in the world and make that your playbook, then you're just a wrongdoer. You're doing it on purpose. That's just wrongdoing.
Bandwagon, inadequate sample, straw man. I like red herring. Delicious. Come on, guys.
My favorite's the reach around.
You mean the appeal to emotion?
I don't know what you call it.
Oh, the bandwagon. The only real fallacy, the only real fallacy that the conservative guys, and I'm bad about it too, that we ever really get caught in is the slippery slope. And the slippery slope fallacy really kind of isn't. The slippery slope is one of the Platonic fallacies, yes. However, where in the course of human history has not the initial application of gun control and registration led to total confiscation and the installation of a dictatorial regime? I'm really asking.
Yeah, I can't think of one.
They usually kill the intelligentsia first.
I think back to 100 years ago in Europe, everybody had a gun. And 100 years before that, every gentleman carried a sword at his side.
Yep.
Yet somehow, Europe survived. And now they mean to tell us that everyone has to be a coffee shop bohemian or we're all lost. Obviously, people maintained their gun security back in 1890 because every German had a gun, every Russian had a gun, every Briton had a gun. And then along come the Marxists and say, we have a better idea. And then, lo and behold, they spring on them this Muslim invasion, and now the Europeans are helpless. And not only helpless, but they have been intentionally sissified, so that I see videos of European men who are standing there and crying while three skinny little Muslims beat up on them.
Oh yeah, they're a bunch of gilded little lady boys.
I would submit that the American Indians were disarmed. There's a pretty good example there. They were pretty much landholders that were disarmed and then done away with economically.
Sure.
I mean, there wasn't much. There wasn't much that the U.S. didn't do to those people that Hitler didn't do later to other people. It's the same story.
Well,
I don't know. I don't think we made them have sex with dogs and stuff like that. I mean, we ran them off their land and shot them and murdered them and raped them. We did do that, but
I wasn't familiar with the sex with dogs thing. That's a new twist.
I went down a rabbit hole for a report for high school, just trying to do my own spin for a report for class of how terrible a concentration camps were.
Evidence.
And there was some, there really were some absolutely unbelievable things that went on, and a Holocaust survivor actually came and spoke at our high school in my freshman year, and he described specifically about stealing sawdust so you could eat it, and German women would come in and they would line up all the men and they would say that guy is handsome, and then they would shoot him, and she would make her lambskins out of that man. And it was a very surreal thing to hear about. So, we disarmed the American Indian and then did terrible things to him. I think to compare it to Auschwitz is, there are not many things that you compare that to.
Well, that's the sort of thing that we want to prevent.
I agree. That's why we should have guns and swords and whatnot.
Don't want. We know what we don't want.
Well, America as a country, the number I keep hearing is that there are 300 million guns in America. 300 million. Somehow or other, we haven't killed each other all yet. According to the liberal playbook, we should all be dead 10 times over. And yet that hasn't happened. My guess is everybody here on this channel right now, from the age of 10 or 12 years old, learned how to use a gun safely. Somehow we made it to adulthood. The nanny state is not your friend. They are selling you security and calling it freedom.
Well, okay, we're drifting off. I didn't want to really dig into the topic of gun control itself.
Okay.
That's tangential to the topic of the misleading statements made by the media in this case. But what you were talking about right there, 300. It's more like 200 million. There's closer to 250 million firearms in the United States. Just about, but not quite, one for every man, woman, and child. Now, one of my favorite memes that has floated around the internet for the last 6 months or so, I think, is the earliest I saw it, says legal gun owners have over 200 million guns and 12 trillion rounds of ammunition. Seriously, guys, if we were a problem, you would know it. I think that's pretty well said. Now, for my taste, I think we've beat the topic to death on the media bias thing, and it is now 2200 on a Friday night. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is 2200 on a Friday night. We've been running our mouths for about an hour, and I know I need to get on off to bed. It has been my absolute privilege to speak with you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And make sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We're just short. I need 4 more followers on Twitter to break 200. So come on, give me some love. And go to the Patreon account. Make sure that you help us out with a couple of bucks here and there every month so we can get some more videos made and update some of the technology and make sure that we're producing a good quality product for you. So until next week, ladies and gentlemen, we love you. We thank you. And remember, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life.
Sicko.